Buenas tardes, mi nombre es Demetrio.
Habla usted, Otomí. Guiño
siquiera para...
There are more than 60 officially recognized languages in Mexico, although linguists and anthropologists estimate the actual number of languages to be much higher. This would come as a surprise to most Americans. All but 4 of Mexico's languages are indigenous. That is, they are the languages of the native Central Americans. In the mountainous state of Oaxaca, more than 200 indigenous languages and dialects are spoken by more than 1 million people. And about half of the state's population does not speak Spanish at all. One people group, the Mazatecs, sometimes carry on entire conversations by whistling. The ethnic diversity in Oaxaca is not limited to its languages and its dialects. The rugged topography has played a significant role in sustaining a cultural diversity whose roots go back thousands of years. Despite the influence of the Spanish during Mexico's colonial era, the geographic isolation of Oaxaca's individual villages and people groups over long periods of time has allowed them to preserve and maintain their unique languages and their customs, their beliefs and rituals, their ancestral traditions, and to a certain extent, their autonomy. For this reason, Oaxaca is the most ethnically complex of Mexico's 31 states, and it is considered by many ethnologists and anthropologists to be the most ethnically complex region in the entire world. This complexity has left Oaxaca's villages, for the most part, unreached by missionaries for the past 2,000 years. One of the largest of Oaxaca's ethnic groups is the Mixtecs. In their own language, they are known as the people of the rain. Among the Mixtecs, there are more than 50 individual people groups, each with its own unique language and traditions. The religion of the Mixtecs, passed down for centuries, is primarily animistic. That is, they believe that everything, even non-human entities such as animals or plants, natural phenomena, geographic features, everyday objects, all of these have souls or spirits. Many communities have their own sacred places, like holy mountains or caves, where they offer animal sacrifices to appease or ask for blessings from a particular god. Perhaps the god of the sun or the moon, the god of corn, rain, fire, hunting, even death. In one village, for instance, the farmers have to sacrifice the blood of a chicken to the god of the land before they can plant seeds. So how can Christians reach out to these isolated people groups that have resisted Western influence for centuries? Well, first it takes someone called by God who has the faith and the courage to share the good news of Jesus Christ, where it has been unwelcome for hundreds of years. A man like Alejandro Rodriguez.
Cuando hablamos de México, pues entendemos que la mayoría de la gente es de la cultura mestiza, es decir, una mezcla
When people think of Mexico, usually they are thinking about a country of people who are now a mix of European and indigenous races and ethnicities.
Sin embargo, hay pueblos que conservan las raíces.
But in reality, there are many people groups that still have the same language and culture they had before the Spanish conquistadors arrived.
Con sus idiomas, con sus culturas, y es una diversidad muy grande la que existe. Oaxaca
has a concentration of these people groups, with more than 200 languages or variants of the indigenous languages. I have lived here in Oaxaca for 22 years, and I am still amazed at how many different languages I've come across.
Conozco pueblos que están a una distancia, pues puedo decir, de menos de 1 kilómetro de distancia.
I know of some villages that are only 1 kilometer apart, but their languages are completely different from one another. Even coming from different linguistic groups. So it makes it very difficult to share the gospel from one village to another when they cannot understand one another.
Alejandro founded Ethnic Outreach of Mexico, EOM, in 1996. That same year, he and his wife Shira moved to Oaxaca's Mixteco region to live in an indigenous unreached village.
En 1992, yo fui a Culiacán, Sinaloa, es un estado al norte de México.
In 1992, I was invited to participate in a campaign to reach indigenous people and was amazed to discover how many indigenous people had never been introduced to the gospel. And I felt God's calling to go to them.
Entonces tomé la decisión de prepararme, entré a una escuela de misiones.
I went for 3 years of missions training at the Mexico campus of the Bethany College of Missions. Afterward, I got married and returned to Oaxaca and went to live in the village of San Juan Tieta, where only Mixteco is spoken.
3 años estudiando misionología y entonces venía a trabajar con nosotros.
There, I became aware of what an incredibly big task it would be to reach out to these Mixtec villages, like the Triqui people and others. I realized that my wife and I could not do it alone. Other people wanted to help, but they had no training in missions or in the specific language and customs of these villages.
And once you're in the village, it can be a very long, slow, and often painful process before connections can be made.
10 days before we arrived in the village leaders told us that we didn't have permission to live there. So when we went to our house, we locked the door and stayed there for a few days. Eventually, we had to go out and be part of the community, but the people ignored us. They wouldn't look us in the face or even look at our house. No one spoke to us or even acknowledged us. It was as if we didn't exist. After about a year, a few people began to talk to us. Just a few words at first, but eventually they wanted to know more about us. In 1996, God called my husband and me to work in a Mixtec village. We had been there about 8 months when a group of people grabbed my husband and hit him. Then they put him in jail and wanted to hang him. But some of our friends in the community went all the way to Tlaxiaco and told another missionary there what was happening, and he alerted the state police, who went to the village and ordered them to release him. In the end, the police told us that we should leave, and if we stayed in the village, they would take no further responsibility for us. We prayed and felt the Lord calling us to stay. We lived there for 7 more years, and thank the Lord, we were able to plant a church that is still alive and growing and serving the Lord.
These are indigenous people groups that have resisted the influence of Christian outsiders for more than 500 years. Through experience, Alejandro has found that being accepted into a community and possibly reaching even the first person takes an average of 7 to 10 years for someone who has completely given their life over to the work. To date, EOM has trained 20 indigenous missionaries who work primarily in the state of Oaxaca, but they also have pioneering work in 3 other coastal states. They typically train 10 to 12 people over a 9-month period of time.
Every year, we have a training that lasts for 9 months and is very intense. We have a process of selecting candidates, and we focus on people who have a clear calling from God to go out to the unreached people. Our focus is on pioneering work in places where people know nothing of the gospel and are often openly hostile to it. We work very hard to help our candidates develop a skill that provides a practical service to the community. We want to instill in the hearts of our candidates that the way of Jesus is the way of humility. We also train them in missiology, theology, anthropology, linguistics, and spiritual warfare. We want to help them understand what they will face in the field, not only in the cultural aspects, but also in the practical and spiritual. After 3.5 months of full-time classes on theory, every day, morning and afternoon, then we send them to practical. We send them to communities that are monolingual, where we know they will struggle with the language, but also they will struggle with the customs, the food, even the use of the kettle to cook. We have a team of pastors in a number of communities who help our candidates in the field. I am Mexican, but not an indigenous Mexican. So it's very difficult for me to get into an indigenous village. That's why we have indigenous people reaching indigenous people. And this is why we build partnerships with indigenous pastors who are already in some of these villages, or with other indigenous Christians we find there. This has helped pave the way for our missionaries to get into a village. So not only do we get better, but our indigenous brothers and sisters become a part of the team. And now, after 22 years, the authorities and village leaders recognize us and they trust us and are more willing to work with us. I believe that we have done this very well. We encounter less opposition and they are less likely to end up in jail.
For the last 15 years, EOM has seen growing interest among young evangelicals in and around Oaxaca to put their faith into action and to venture out where the Word of God has never taken root before. The difficult, complex places that will require a person with a very specific skill set. Many are feeling the call, but EOM is limited by its existing rented facilities, which are inadequate to properly train them for this complex task. Also, recent increases in rent have made them no longer cost-effective. EOM needs a base of operations that could serve as a center for missionary training and strategic coordination, as well as dormitory and kitchen facilities to accommodate missionaries in training. The plan, should God provide the funding, is to construct 2 small buildings on this piece of property in the city of Oaxaco, in the state of Oaxaca, where Alejandro and other EOM missionaries currently work. The land was donated by Alejandro's teenage son, who gave his own national scholarship money to make the purchase. Ministries like EOM don't need us to manage their ministry or to oversee their operations. They don't ask for salaries or ongoing financial support. EOM has a solid record of making disciples and financial integrity. They simply need a functional facility that will give them the ability to extend and multiply their ministry so that they can reach more of the lost for Jesus Christ where they live. These 2 small buildings to serve as a base for the training of new missionaries would have a direct effect on at least 27 separate indigenous people groups, 21 of which currently have an EOM presence, and another 6 that EOM has targeted to reach out to within the next 5 years. If you're watching this video, you've probably been blessed by God with greater wealth than 95% of the people living in the less developed places in the world. But our wealth is not simply a blessing. We also have an obligation to use it well. Great Commission Resources International, GCRI, believes that this is an opportunity to put that blessing to good use. We would like to ask you to pray about helping to provide a training facility for EOM as they seek to take the good news of Jesus Christ to hard-to-reach villages in southern Mexico. Now, GCRI is comprised entirely of volunteers, so no part of your donation toward this project will be deducted to support GCRI's overhead or other expenses. The final design and construction will be carried out by local professionals and a local workforce. It's our hope that you will consider a gift, whatever you believe God would have you give, to help make this missions training base a reality. It's both our hope and our prayer.